When the police started asking questions, Matthias Volkov already knew the clinic was finished. They weren't there for the woman sleeping upstairs. They weren't there for the man recovering in the back room. They were there for him. 6 months earlier, Iris Kane had broken into his clinic to steal morphine for her brother. He could have called the police. He didn't. Instead, he gave her the medication. Then he gave her a job. Then he gave her a place to stay. Somewhere along the way, he crossed a line he had sworn never to cross again. Not because he wanted to save her, but because he stayed. Now her brother was alive. The clinic was under investigation, and the only person Iris trusted was the man about to lose everything. This is the story of how that happened. The Weight of Smoke, a dark romance novel. Prologue. The first time Matthias Volkov saw Iris Kane, she was stealing morphine from his private clinic. He watched her through the two-way mirror in his office, her thin fingers working the lock on the pharmaceutical cabinet with a hairpin and what looked like the broken end of a ballpoint pen. She was terrible at it. Her hands shook. Twice she dropped the pen and had to retrieve it from the floor, her breathing audible even through the glass. Sharp, panicked, amateur. He could have stopped her in 30 seconds. Instead, he lit a cigarette and waited. The clinic occupied the 3rd floor of a building he owned in a part of the city where ambulances didn't come quickly and police came even slower. Matthias had learned long ago that geography was destiny. People who ended up in his waiting room weren't there because they trusted him. They were there because they had run out of alternatives, and alternatives were what Matthias traded in. He didn't ask questions. He didn't report gunshot wounds. He accepted cash, jewelry, information, and occasionally, when someone had nothing else, favors to be collected later. His medical license had been revoked in 3 countries, but his hands were still steady, and his knowledge was still sharp, and in this neighborhood, that made him more valuable than any piece of paper. The girl finally got the cabinet open. She grabbed 2 bottles without reading the labels, shoved them in her coat pocket, and turned toward the door. Matthias stepped out of his office. She froze. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the dim hallway. She was younger than he'd thought. Mid-20s, perhaps. With dark hair pulled back in a careless knot, and eyes that had the bruised, sleepless quality of someone who had stopped expecting good things. Her coat was too large, her jeans torn at one knee. She looked like she had been hollowed out and poorly reassembled. "Those won't help," he said quietly. Her hand moved to her pocket, protective. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The bottles you took. One is a muscle relaxant. The other is an antiemetic. Neither will do what you're hoping for." She stared at him. He watched her calculate. Fight, flight, or negotiation. He had seen that look before, on the faces of men who owed money to people who collected debts with pliers and plastic sheeting. "Put them back," he said. "I'll give you what you actually need." "I don't need anything from you." "Yes, you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't have broken into my clinic at 2 in the morning." She didn't move. Matthias took a step closer, slowly, the way one approached a wounded animal. He could see her properly now. There was a fading bruise along her jaw, yellow-green at the edges. Her hands were chapped and raw, nails bitten to the quick. She smelled like cold air and something floral. Cheap shampoo, maybe, or borrowed soap. "Who are you stealing for?" he asked. "No one." "Then who's in pain?" Her expression fractured, just slightly. It was the look of someone who had been holding themselves together through pure willpower and had just felt the first crack. "My brother," she whispered. Matthias nodded. He had suspected as much. Desperation had a particular shape when it was for someone else. "Come with me," he said. She shook her head, backing toward the door. "I don't. I can't pay you. I didn't ask you to. I've heard about you. About this place. I know what you do." "Then you know I don't call the police." That stopped her. He could see her thinking, weighing risks, trying to decide which danger was more immediate. He wondered if she knew how transparent she was, how easy to read. Probably not. People rarely understood how much they gave away. "What do you want?" she asked finally. It was the right question. Matthias had learned that everything in life was a transaction, and the only people who pretended otherwise were the ones who'd never had to trade something they couldn't afford to lose. He looked at her, this thin, exhausted girl who had broken into his clinic and stood in his hallway like she was already guilty of something worse than theft, and felt the familiar weight of recognition. He knew what it looked like when someone was drowning on dry land. "I want you to sit down," he said. "Tell me what's wrong with your brother. And then I want you to let me help." "Why?" It was a fair question. He didn't have a good answer. "Because you're here," he said quietly, "and I'm here. And neither of us has anywhere better to be." She studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the 2 bottles. She set them on the floor between them like an offering. Matthias picked them up, his fingers brushing the cracked linoleum where hers had just been. "Follow me," he said. She did. And in that moment, though neither of them knew it yet, both of their lives became something they could no longer walk away from. Chapter 1. Iris returned 3 days later. Matthias heard the front door of the clinic open just after midnight. He was in the surgical suite, stitching a knife wound in the shoulder of a man who had given his name as John, and whose ID, when Matthias glimpsed it falling from his pocket, said Raymond. The man was unconscious now, breathing slowly under local anesthetic, and Matthias worked in silence, his movements precise and economical. He didn't look up when the door to the suite cracked open. "Wait in the office," he said. Iris didn't respond, but he heard her footsteps retreat. When he finished, 23 stitches, antibiotics, instructions that wouldn't be followed, he cleaned up, washed his hands, and found her sitting in the chair across from his desk. She looked worse than before. The bruise on her jaw had darkened, and there were new shadows beneath her eyes. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers laced together so tightly the knuckles were white. Matthias closed the door and sat down. He didn't ask how her brother was. He already knew the answer from the way she held herself, carefully, as if any sudden movement might break something. "He's worse," she said. "The medication helped for a day, maybe 2, but now—" She trailed off. Matthias waited. He had learned that silence was often more effective than questions. "I need more," she said finally. "That's not how this works. You said you'd help. I gave you enough for 2 weeks. It's been 3 days. Her jaw tightened. "He needs more than I thought. Or you're not measuring correctly. I'm doing exactly what you told me." "Then your brother is addicted, not in pain." The words landed like a slap. Iris flinched, her hands unlacing and clenching into fists. For a moment, Matthias thought she might hit him. He wouldn't have stopped her. "He was in a car accident," she said, her voice low and hard. 6 months ago. They gave him medication at the hospital, and then they cut him off. He's not an addict. He's in pain. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." "Fuck you." Matthias regarded her calmly. He had been cursed at by men twice her size, by people holding guns and knives, and once, memorably, a broken bottle. Her anger didn't frighten him. What interested him was the way it made her look more alive than anything else he'd seen from her. "I'm not your enemy," he said. "You're not my friend either. No, I'm the person who can help your brother, but I won't enable his dependence. So what do you suggest?" "Bring him here, let me examine him properly. If he's in legitimate pain, I'll treat him. If he's addicted, I'll help him through withdrawal." "He won't come." "Why not?" She looked away. "He doesn't leave the apartment anymore." Matthias absorbed this. It told him more than she probably meant to reveal. Agoraphobia, depression, or both. The accident hadn't just broken his body. "Then I'll come to him," he said. "No." "Iris." I said no. Her voice was sharp enough to cut. Matthias studied her, trying to understand what she was protecting, not her brother's privacy. That had already been compromised the moment she'd broken into his clinic. Something else. Something she thought would be worse if he saw it. "What are you afraid of?" he asked quietly. "I'm not afraid." "Yes, you are. You're terrified. The question is whether you're more afraid of me or of whatever is waiting at home." She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. This was a mistake. Sit down. I don't take orders from you. No, but you came here because you need something, and I'm offering it. The least you can do is listen. She remained standing, her body coiled tight, ready to run. Matthias could see the calculations moving behind her eyes again. Fight, flight, or something else entirely. I'll make you a deal, he said. Her expression shuddered. I don't want to owe you anything. Too late, you already do. That landed. She went very still. Here's the deal, Matthias continued. I'll give you enough medication for another week. In exchange, you work here. 3 nights a week, 6 hours each. You answer the phone, clean the instruments, restock supplies, basic tasks. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a job. With medication as payment. With medication as an advance. Once your brother is stable, we'll discuss actual wages. She stared at him. Why? It was the same question she'd asked before. He still didn't have a good answer. I need the help, he said, which was true but not the whole truth. And you need a reason to leave your apartment. You don't know anything about me. I know you haven't been taking care of yourself. I know you're exhausted. I know you're one bad day away from doing something you can't take back. Her breath caught. For a moment, her face did something complicated. Surprise, recognition, and beneath that, something that looked almost like relief. As if someone finally seeing her was worse and better than she'd expected. When do I start? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tonight. I can't. Yes, you can. Your brother has enough medication to last until morning. You'll be home before he wakes. She looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, she sat back down. I don't trust you, she said. Good, Matthias replied. Trust is expensive. We'll start with something cheaper. Like what? Proximity. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of morphine, measured out a week's supply into a smaller container, and slid it across the desk. Iris took it, her fingers careful, reverent. Thank you, she said quietly. Matthias nodded. He didn't tell her that gratitude made him uncomfortable, that kindness felt like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. Instead, he stood, gestured for her to follow, and led her to the supply closet where she would spend the next 6 hours learning the geography of his small, necessary kingdom. Neither of them spoke much after that. But when she left at dawn, the medication tucked safely in her pocket, Matthias stood at the window and watched her disappear into the gray morning. He told himself he was simply monitoring an investment. He told himself proximity was just proximity. He told himself he wasn't already in trouble. Chapter 2. Iris was a terrible employee. She showed up late, frequently distracted, and twice fell asleep in the supply closet while supposedly organizing bandages. She answered the phone with all the warmth of a restraining order and filed patient records in what appeared to be a system based on chaos theory and spite. Matthias kept her anyway. He told himself it was because finding help in this neighborhood was difficult. People who worked for him either asked too many questions or not enough, and both were liabilities. Iris existed in the narrow space between curious enough to be competent, exhausted enough not to care. But the truth, which he acknowledged only in moments of brutal honesty, was that her presence changed something in the clinic. The air felt less stagnant. The silences less absolute. It was like opening a window in a room that had been sealed too long. She didn't talk much about herself. What he learned came in fragments, assembled over weeks like broken glass into something that resembled a picture. Her brother's name was Simon. He was 23, 2 years younger than Iris, and before the accident, he'd been studying architecture. Now he lived in their one-bedroom apartment, sleeping on a mattress in the corner, and spent his days staring at blueprints he no longer had the focus to complete. Their parents were gone, father to prison, mother to exhaustion or indifference, or both. Iris didn't elaborate, and Matthias didn't push. She worked nights at a diner 3 blocks from the clinic, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like regret. Between the diner and Matthias's clinic, and taking care of Simon, she slept roughly 4 hours a night. You're going to collapse, Matthias told her one evening, watching her lean against the desk, eyes closed, holding herself upright through sheer stubbornness. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Add it to the list. What list? Of things I'm terrible at. She opened her eyes. Being a sister, being an employee, being a person who doesn't steal medication from unlocked clinics. The clinic was locked. Not well enough. There was something almost like humor in her voice. Matthias felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. Not quite warmth, but its distant cousin. You're not terrible at being a sister, he said quietly. You don't know that. I know you broke into my clinic for him. I know you worked 2 jobs to keep him fed. I know you haven't given up on him, which means you're a better person than most. Iris looked at him strangely. You say that like you're not included in most. I'm not. Why do you think that? It was an honest question. He appreciated that she didn't try to contradict him, didn't offer empty reassurance. She simply waited for his answer. Because I've done things that can't be undone, he said, and I did them with full knowledge of what they would cost. What kind of things? Matthias considered how much to tell her. He had spent years building walls between himself and anyone who might try to know him. But something about Iris, her exhaustion, her bluntness, the way she looked at him without flinching, made him want to offer her something true. I used to work in a hospital, he said, a real one, with proper funding and ethics boards and people who believed medicine was about saving lives. What happened? I learned that saving lives is complicated. Sometimes the person on the table is a good man. Sometimes he's a monster. Sometimes you don't know which until it's too late. And you made the wrong choice? I made a choice. Whether it was wrong depends on your definition of justice. Iris nodded slowly. She didn't ask for details. He suspected she understood that some stories were too heavy to share with someone you'd only known for a few weeks. Do you regret it? She asked instead. Every day. But you'd do it again. It wasn't a question. He met her eyes, those dark, tired eyes that had seen enough of the world to know that regret and necessity weren't opposites. Yes, he said. She held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she pushed away from the desk, straightened her shoulders, and went back to restocking the gauze. Matthias watched her work. He thought about the man he'd been before, the choice that had cost him everything. That man had believed in redemption, in second chances, in the idea that people could be fixed. This version of himself knew better. Some things, once broken, stayed broken. But maybe, he thought, watching Iris's careful hands sorting through supplies, broken didn't have to mean useless. Chapter 3. The first time Iris saw where Matthias lived, it was because she had nowhere else to go. It happened on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after she'd started working at the clinic. She arrived for her shift with a split lip and blood on her collar. Not her blood. She clarified quickly when Matthias grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. Simon, she said, he was having a bad night. I tried to calm him down and he didn't mean to. Matthias released her arm and stepped back, his jaw tight. Show me. It's nothing. Iris. His voice carried a note of command she'd learned not to argue with. She tilted her head back, letting him examine the cut. His fingers were cold and precise, tilting her chin toward the light. This needs cleaning, he said. I'll do it myself. No sit. She sat. He disappeared into the supply room and returned with antiseptic, cotton swabs, and butterfly bandages. His movements were efficient, impersonal, but there was something in the set of his shoulders that suggested barely controlled anger. It wasn't his fault, Iris said quietly. That doesn't make it acceptable. He's in pain. So are you. The words hung between them. Matthias finished cleaning the wound and applied the bandages with care that felt almost like tenderness. When he was done, he didn't step back. You can't go home tonight, he said. Yes, I can. You won't. You don't get to make that decision. Someone has to. Iris felt something hot and sharp rise in her chest, anger, or maybe relief that someone was finally telling her she didn't have to handle everything alone. She hated both reactions equally. "Where would I go?" she asked. "My apartment. It's upstairs." She stared at him. "No. It's not a request. I'm not leaving Simon alone. You're not helping him by letting him hurt you." He didn't mean. Intent doesn't matter when the damage is done. The certainty in his voice made her want to hit him, or maybe cry. She wasn't sure which would feel better. "One night," Matthias said, his voice softening slightly, "let him sleep it off. Go back in the morning when he's calmer. And if he's not, then we'll figure it out together." The word "together" did something strange to her chest. She couldn't remember the last time someone had offered to share a burden rather than add to it. "Okay," she whispered. Matthias nodded and led her through the back of the clinic to a narrow stairwell she'd never noticed before. His apartment was exactly what she expected: sparse, clean, functional. A studio with a kitchenette in one corner, a bed against the far wall, bookshelves filled with medical texts, and nothing else. No art. No photographs. No evidence that anyone actually lived there. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep on the couch." There is no couch. "Then I'll sleep in the chair." Iris looked at the single armchair by the window, hard, wooden, designed for reading rather than rest. "That's stupid." Nevertheless. "Matthias." She was too tired to argue properly. "The bed is big enough. We're both adults." He regarded her carefully, as if checking for hidden traps. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm too exhausted to care." A ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "All right." They moved around each other with careful politeness. She borrowed a t-shirt and boxer shorts from his drawer. He disappeared into the bathroom to change. When he returned, she was already under the covers, turned toward the wall. The mattress dipped as he lay down. He stayed on his side, a careful distance between them. "Thank you," Iris said quietly. "For what?" "For not making me go back." Matthias didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was low, almost hesitant. "I know what it's like to feel trapped. To think you're the only thing holding someone together, and if you let go, they'll fall apart." "What happened?" "I let go." "Did they fall apart?" "Yes." Iris closed her eyes. She wanted to ask more. Who? When? Why? But exhaustion was pulling her down. For the first time in months, she felt almost safe. It terrified her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. Some people are meant to fall." She thought about that as sleep took her. About falling and catching and the difference between saving someone and simply standing beside them while they broke. When she woke, it was still dark. Matthias was asleep beside her, his breathing slow and even. Without thinking, she turned toward him. He looked different in sleep, younger, less guarded. There was a scar along his collarbone, pale against his skin. She wondered what had caused it. She wondered what it felt like to carry visible proof of damage. Her own scars were all internal, invisible, inoperable, permanent. She closed her eyes again. This time, when sleep came, she didn't dream of falling. Chapter 4. Simon got worse. Iris knew it was coming, had known for months, really, but knowledge didn't make it easier. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping, spent hours staring at nothing, his eyes hollow, his hands trembling even when they were still. The medication wasn't enough anymore. Nothing was enough. "He needs professional help," Matthias said one night, his voice careful. "I know. A hospital, a proper facility. I can't afford that. There are programs that have waiting lists 6 months long. He doesn't have 6 months." Matthias didn't argue. They both knew she was right. Instead, he made a decision that would change everything. "Bring him here," he said. Iris looked up from the inventory she'd been pretending to organize. "What?" "The clinic. There's a room in the back I don't use. Bring him here." "You can't. That's not." "I can, and I will." "Why?" It was the third time she'd asked him that question. This time, his answer was different. "Because you're drowning," he said quietly, "and I'm tired of watching." The words hit her like a punch. She felt her throat close, her eyes burn. She had spent so long holding everything together that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone notice she was breaking. "I can't pay you," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking for?" Matthias met her eyes. "Nothing. I'm asking for nothing. Nobody does that." "I know." She studied him, this man who ran an illegal clinic in the worst part of the city, who stitched knife wounds at midnight and asked no questions, who had given her a job and a place to sleep and now, impossibly, was offering to save her brother. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. He almost smiled. "Would you like the list chronologically or by severity?" Despite everything, she laughed. It came out wrong. Too sharp, too bright, edged with hysteria. But it was a laugh. "Chronologically," she said. "That would take all night." "Good thing we have time." They didn't bring Simon to the clinic that night. But 3 days later, when he tried to walk to the bathroom and collapsed halfway there, when Iris finally admitted she couldn't do this alone, Matthias borrowed a van from a man who didn't ask questions and drove them across the city in the pre-dawn darkness. Simon was barely conscious. He weighed almost nothing. Matthias carried him up the stairs like he was made of paper. The back room was small but clean. A bed, a chair, a window that looked out onto a brick wall. Matthias set Simon down gently, checked his vitals, adjusted his pain medication. Iris stood in the doorway, watching. She felt untethered, like gravity had stopped working and she was floating away from everything solid. "Thank you," she said. Matthias glanced at her. "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get harder before it gets better." "I know. He'll need constant monitoring, someone with him all the time." "I'll stay." "No. You'll work your shifts, sleep in the apartment, and trust me to do my job." "I can't." "Yes, you can. He needs a doctor, not another person to worry about." Matthias's voice was firm, but not unkind. "And you need to eat something and sleep for more than 3 hours at a time." Iris wanted to argue, but exhaustion had finally caught up with her, and she had nothing left to fight with. "Okay," she whispered. Over the next 2 weeks, she learned what it meant to let someone help. She learned that Matthias checked on Simon every 4 hours, even in the middle of the night, that he adjusted medications with a precision born of years of practice, that he sat with Simon during the worst of the withdrawal, talking quietly about nothing, books he'd read, places he'd been, the architecture of old buildings. She learned that healing was uglier than she'd expected. Simon screamed, he begged, he said terrible things, that he hated her, that this was her fault, that he wanted to die. Matthias let her hear it. He didn't shield her from the worst moments, but he also didn't let her carry them alone. "He doesn't mean it," Matthias said one night, finding her in the hallway with tears streaming down her face. "I know. It's the pain talking, not your brother." "I know that too." "Then why are you crying?" "Because even if he doesn't mean it, part of him still believes it, and part of me thinks he's right." Matthias was quiet for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so gentle it made her cry harder. "You're not the reason he's suffering," Matthias said quietly. "You're the reason he's still alive. That's not the same as saving him. No, it's better. Saving is about control. Staying is about love." Iris looked up at him, at this man who claimed he wasn't good, who believed he'd forfeited any right to kindness, who was currently standing in a dim hallway at 3 a.m, touching her face like she was something precious. "Who stayed for you?" she whispered. His hand fell away. "No one." "That's not true." "How would you know?" "Because you're still here, and nobody survives alone." For a moment, she thought he might tell her. She could see it in his eyes. The memory, the wound, the person he'd never quite let go of. But then he stepped back, the distance between them expanding like scar tissue. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll sit with Simon for a while." She wanted to argue, but she was so tired, and he was already walking away. That night, she dreamed of drowning, but this time, when she reached for the surface, someone reached back. Chapter 5. Simon got better. It happened slowly, so slowly that at first Iris thought she was imagining it. But then he started eating solid food, started sleeping through the night, started asking for books, and then, eventually, for his old blueprints. Matthias watched the progress with quiet satisfaction. Iris watched Matthias. She had started to notice things, the way he rubbed his left shoulder when he was tired. The fact that he drank his coffee black and barely ate lunch. The small, careful way he touched Simon's forehead to check for fever, as if he'd forgotten how to be gentle and was relearning through repetition. She noticed that he didn't smile, except sometimes late at night when he thought no one was watching. She noticed that he kept a photograph in his desk drawer, face down, never looked at, but never thrown away. She noticed that he was lonely. "Tell me about the scar," she said one night. They were in his apartment, which had become a kind of neutral territory. She slept there most nights now, in the bed they shared with a careful distance between them. It was practical, Matthias had said. Efficient. The apartment was closer to Simon's room than her old place, and she needed the sleep. None of those reasons explained why they always ended up talking until dawn. "Which one?" Matthias asked. "The one on your collarbone." He looked at her. "Why do you want to know?" "Because it's there, and you're here. And I'm curious. Curiosity is dangerous. So is proximity. We already established that." He almost smiled. Then, after a long pause, "It was a bottle. Broken. Held by a man who thought I'd let his son die." "Did you?" "No, but I couldn't save him either. Sometimes those things are the same." Iris absorbed this. "Did the man go to prison?" "No, I didn't press charges." "Why not?" "Because I understood. If I had a son, and someone couldn't save him, I'd want to hurt them too." There was something raw in his voice. Iris sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Matthias, do you have a son?" "No. But you wanted one." He looked away. "There was a woman, a long time ago. We talked about it. Children, a house, all the things people promise each other when they still believe in futures. What happened? I made the choice that cost me my license. She stayed. I left. By the time I understood what I'd lost, it was too late to go back. You could have called her. And said what? That I'd become the kind of person who operates illegal clinics and stitches up criminals? That I'd chosen my own sense of justice over the life we'd planned." He shook his head. "Some doors close permanently." Iris thought about that, about doors and choices and the distance between who you wanted to be and who you became. "I don't think you're the person you think you are," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "You think you're broken, irredeemable. But you saved Simon. You gave me a job when I was desperate. You've never once asked me for anything in return. That doesn't make me good. Maybe not, but it doesn't make you the monster you're convinced you are either." Matthias was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I don't know how to be anything else." "Then learn. It's not that simple." "Nothing worth doing is simple." She reached out impulsively and took his hand. His fingers were cold. She held them carefully, the way she'd learned to hold things that might break. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "You just have to be here." He looked at their joined hands. "Why?" "Because proximity is cheaper than trust, remember?" This time, he did smile. It was small, and sad, and more real than anything she'd seen from him before. "Yes," he said, "I remember." They sat like that until morning, hands linked, neither of them sleeping, neither of them willing to let go first. Chapter 6. The moment Matthias realized he was in love with Iris, he was stitching a bullet wound in a teenager's leg. The boy, 17, maybe 18, had been shot during a robbery gone wrong. He was crying, high on adrenaline and terror, and Matthias worked quickly, his hands steady even as the boy thrashed. Iris held him down. She murmured something Matthias couldn't hear, something soft and reassuring, and the boy stopped fighting. His breathing evened. He stared at Iris like she was the only solid thing in the world. Matthias understood the feeling. Later, after the boy had been bandaged and sent home with antibiotics he probably wouldn't take, Matthias found Iris washing blood from her hands in the small sink. "You were good with him," he said. He was scared. "You weren't." She glanced at him. "I've seen worse." "Have you?" "Simon. The first week. When I thought he might die." She dried her hands on a paper towel. "That was worse than anything." Matthias nodded. He had seen that week too. Had watched her sit by Simon's bed for hours, refusing to sleep, refusing to eat, as if she could will him back to health through sheer stubbornness. "You love him very much," he said. "He's my brother." "That's not an answer." Iris leaned against the sink, her expression thoughtful. "I love him because he's the only person who never asked me to be different, even when I was failing, even when I was a mess. He just stayed. Like you stayed for him." "I suppose." Matthias thought about staying, about the weight of presence, about how the most radical act of love was sometimes just refusing to leave. "I envy that," he said quietly. "What?" "Having someone who stayed." Iris looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You have that now." "What do you mean?" "I'm here. I'm staying." The words landed like a punch. Matthias felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept locked for years, something he'd convinced himself was dead. "Iris." "Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't tell me all the reasons why I shouldn't. Don't tell me you're not worth it. I know what you think of yourself. But I'm not asking for your permission." "Then what are you asking for?" "Nothing. I'm just telling you I'm staying." Matthias stared at her, this exhausted, stubborn, impossibly brave woman who had walked into his clinic 6 months ago and somehow become necessary. "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Because you stayed for me first." It was true. He had. Without thinking, without asking for anything in return, he had stayed, and now she was doing the same. It was the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to him. "I'm not good at this," he said. "At what?" "Letting people close." "I know, neither am I." "Then we're both going to fail." "Probably," she smiled, small, tired, real. "But we'll fail together." Matthias wanted to kiss her. The impulse was so strong it almost hurt. Instead, he took a step closer and touched her cheek, the way he had that night in the hallway. "I don't deserve you," he said. "That's not your decision to make." "Then whose is it?" "Mine, and I've already decided." She turned her face into his palm. Such a small gesture, it unmade him completely. "Iris," he whispered. "I know." She did. He could see it in her eyes. The recognition, the acceptance, the terrible understanding that they were both too damaged to do this right, but were going to do it anyway. He kissed her. It was gentle, hesitant, completely unlike anything he'd imagined. She tasted like coffee and exhaustion. Her hands came up to his chest, not pushing away but holding on. When they broke apart, she was crying. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing. Everything." "I don't know," she laughed, breathless. "I didn't think this could happen." "What?" "This. Feeling safe with someone." Matthias pulled her close, pressing his face into her hair. "You are. I promise." "Don't promise. Just stay." "I will." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the small, sterile room that had become the center of both their lives. It wasn't salvation. It wasn't even healing. But it was enough. Chapter 7. 3 months later, Simon left. Not left as in died. Left as in packed his things, hugged his sister, and took a bus to another city where a friend from his architecture program had offered him a job. Iris cried for 2 hours. "I'm happy for him," she said, her face pressed against Matthias's chest. "I am, but I don't know what to do now." "What do you mean?" "I've spent so long taking care of him. What if that's all I know how to do?" Matthias stroked her hair. "Then you'll learn to do something else." "Like what?" "Whatever you want." She pulled back to look at him. Her eyes were red, swollen. "What if I don't know what I want?" "Then we'll figure it out. Together." The words still felt foreign in his mouth, but less so now. They had spent months learning each other. The rhythms of shared space, the language of touch, the strange intimacy of trusting someone with the worst parts of yourself. It wasn't easy. Some days Iris woke panicking, convinced something terrible had happened to Simon. Some nights Matthias couldn't sleep, old guilt pressing on his chest like stones. But they stayed. "I want to work here," Iris said suddenly. "Properly. Not just answering phones and organizing supplies. I want to learn. I want to help people the way you do." Matthias studied her. "It's not easy work." "I know. It's often thankless, sometimes dangerous." "I know that too. And there are things you'll see that you can't unsee." "Matthias," she cupped his face. "I've already seen them. I've lived them. Stop trying to protect me from things that have already happened." He leaned into her touch. All right. I'll teach you, starting tomorrow." Her smile was like sunrise. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I'm a terrible teacher." "Good thing I'm a terrible student." They both laughed. It felt like something new. Permission to be light in the middle of heaviness, to find humor in their shared brokenness. That night, they made love for the first time. It was slow, careful, slightly awkward. They were both out of practice, both carrying too many old wounds. But there was something honest in the fumbling, something real in the way they looked at each other and didn't look away. Afterwards, Iris traced the scar on his collarbone. "Tell me about the woman," she said. "Why?" "Because she was important to you, and I want to know what you lost." Matthias was quiet for a moment. Then, "Her name was Elena. She was a nurse. We met during my residency." "Did you love her?" "Yes, for a long time." "Do you still?" "No, but I still miss who I was when I was with her. Before everything." Iris kissed the scar. "You're allowed to miss things, even if you can't go back." "Are you?" "What do you mean?" "Are you allowed to miss the version of yourself from before?" She thought about it. "I don't think I do. That version of me was just surviving. This version might actually be living." "Might be?" "I'm still figuring it out." Matthias pulled her closer. "We both are." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, breathing in sync, neither of them dreaming of falling. Chapter 8. The police came on a Tuesday. 2 detectives asking questions about a man Matthias had treated 3 weeks earlier. The man had died, not from the injury Matthias had stitched, but from something else, something unrelated. But someone had talked, and now there were questions about illegal medical practices and aiding criminals. Matthias answered calmly. He showed them his records, meticulous, detailed, exactly what any good doctor would keep. He explained his philosophy that medical care was a human right, and sometimes rights had to be claimed outside official channels. The detectives listened. They didn't arrest him, but they made it clear that the clinic was being watched now. When they left, Matthias sat in his office and tried to calculate risk. The math was simple. If he kept operating, he would eventually be arrested. If he closed the clinic, people would suffer, people who had nowhere else to go, who couldn't afford official channels, who needed someone willing to help without judgment. Iris found him an hour later, still sitting, still calculating. "What are you thinking?" she asked. That I built this place because I needed to prove I could still help people, that I could still be useful even after everything. And now? Now I'm wondering if I built a prison instead. She sat across from him. Do you want to stop? No, but I might have to. What if you didn't? They'll arrest me eventually. What if I ran it? Matthias looked up sharply. What? I could run the clinic. You could teach me. Train me properly. And when you're ready, if you're ready, you could step back. Iris, that's not. Why not? I know the work. I know the patients. And I'm not on their radar. Yet. So we'll be careful. That's not a plan. It's better than closing. Better than giving up. Matthias studied her. In the months since she'd walked into his life, she had changed. Grown stronger, more certain, less afraid. He had watched her learn to set broken bones and mix medications. He had watched her sit with dying patients and hold their hands when no one else would. She would be good at this, maybe better than he had been. I'm scared, he admitted. Of what? That something will happen to you. That they'll arrest you, or hurt you, or... Matthias, she took his hands. I'm already here. I've already chosen this. You can't protect me from something I'm walking into with open eyes. I can try. No, you can trust me. There's a difference. He looked at their joined hands. I'm not good at trust. I know, but you're learning. She was right. He was learning. Slowly, painfully, against every instinct that told him safety meant distance. Okay, he said finally. Okay? We'll do it your way. I'll train you. When you're ready, I'll step back. But I'm not leaving. I wouldn't let you. That's very controlling of you. I learned from the best. They both smiled. And in that moment, sitting in a clinic that might not survive the month, with the weight of impossible choices pressing on both of them, Matthias felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was terrifying. It was also real. Epilogue. 2 years later. The clinic still stood, though under new management. Iris ran it now, with Matthias as a silent partner, training new volunteers, consulting on difficult cases, helping in ways that didn't put him on any official paperwork. Simon visited twice a year. He was working for an architecture firm in Portland, designing affordable housing. He looked healthy. He looked happy. Thank you, he told Matthias during his last visit, for what you did. I didn't do much. You gave Iris a place to land. That's everything. Matthias didn't know how to respond to that. He settled for a nod. Now he stood in his apartment. Their apartment. He corrected himself, watching Iris sleep. She was on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, looking younger than she had any right to be after everything she'd lived through. He thought about proximity, about staying, about how the most radical form of love was sometimes just bearing witness to another person's existence and choosing not to look away. They weren't healed. Neither of them would ever be fully healed. The wounds were too deep, too old, carved into parts of themselves that couldn't be reached by medicine or time. But they had each other, and some days that felt like enough. Iris stirred, opening her eyes. What time is it? Early. Go back to sleep. Can't. Too much to do. The clinic can survive without you for a few more hours. Can it survive without you? It's been doing fine. Liar. You were there until midnight yesterday. Someone had to train the new volunteer. Someone enjoys teaching more than he admits. Matthias smiled. Perhaps. She reached for him, pulling him back into bed. He went willingly, settling beside her, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long practice. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Regret what? This. Us. Everything that happened. He thought about it, really thought about it. The answer came easily. No, he said. Never. Even though we're both still broken? Especially because of that. She turned to look at him. Why? Because broken things that stay together are stronger than things that were never damaged at all. They've been tested. They know their weaknesses. And they choose to keep standing anyway. Iris smiled. Small, tired, completely real. That's very philosophical for 6 in the morning. I contain multitudes. You contain bullshit. That too. They lay in comfortable silence. Outside, the city was waking. Trucks rumbling, voices rising, the perpetual hum of life continuing despite everything. I love you, Iris said suddenly. Matthias felt his breath catch. She had never said it before. Neither had he. They had both been too afraid of what the words might demand. I love you too, he said. Are we allowed to say that? I don't know, but we just did. So what happens now? Matthias thought about futures, about promises, about how the only thing more dangerous than hope was the absence of it. Now, he said, we stay. Just that? Just that. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was what they had, and what they had was real. Iris kissed him. Soft, brief, carrying the weight of everything they'd survived and everything they'd chosen. Okay, she whispered, we stay. And they did. Not because they were healed, not because they were whole, but because in a world that had tried to break them both, they had found someone who made staying feel less like survival and more like choice. It wasn't salvation. It was something better. It was permission to live. The end.